Hey, Byron here again. So let's talk about the fundamentals of 2D design, right? Remember, design is the underlying plan on which artists base their work. Oftentimes, design and composition are synonymous with one another. So we're going to take a look at those guiding elements and principles, components that kind of fall under the umbrella of visual design. Okay, so if you look at art as a whole, it has components, right? One of those components is subject matter, right? What's the subject of the piece? These are the images or things represented in a work of art, right? If you can recognize it, describe it, that's essentially the subject matter. So if we look at Hokusai's The Great Wave, we can pick out, well, obviously there's a big wave. That's subject matter. There are boats with people in them. There's the sky. There's Mount Fuji in the distance. All of these things that we can describe, that's the subject matter of the piece. It's the vehicle for the meaning of the work, and choosing the right subject for what you're saying is really critical. Okay, so another component is content. Content is the expression of the work, the meaning, the significance of the piece, or the aesthetic value of the work of art. And if we look at The Great Wave, we might see that content being humans against nature, or in harmony with nature, depends on how you see it. But that essentially is what Hokusai is trying to show us, is that relationship between humans and nature. It's the big idea of the piece, right? Okay, so the next component is media, right? This is, what the thing is made out of, the materials used to make it. In this case, it's a woodcut, a very beautiful woodcut, a print, right? And remember, your art is nothing if not an expression of its medium, right? So much of the character of the work comes from the materials from which it's made. Right? Very important. And then there's form, right? The formal qualities of the work. This is where you organize the elements of art according to the principles of design, right? And so there are two aspects of form. There's the elements and principles, right? Now those elements are the building blocks, and the principles are the organizing ideas that help you arrange those building blocks, right? So elements of line, shape, value, texture, color, and space. Principles of variety, harmony, balance, economy, movement, dominance, and proportion. These things make up the look of the work. Like, how is the work made? Okay, and so when all of the elements and principles work together, the piece is said to have formal unity. Remember, those are all things that have to do with form. Okay, the successful integration of all of the elements and principles together. Usually when you've got formal unity, the piece is beautiful, right? It works visually. Now, what we're really after, though, is organic unity. And that's when all of the components are working together well. Like the successful integration of all of those components working together, not just the look of the work, but the meaning of the piece and the subject matter. Everything seems to gel. The thing kind of takes on a life of its own. It was meant to be that way, right? That's what we're after. We're looking for making our work great like that, having organic unity. Okay, so does Hokusai's The Great Wave have organic unity? You better bet. It's amazing. It's a fantastic piece. Okay, so form. Let's talk more specifically about form. like the nuts and bolts of visual design. All right, and again, form is made up of the elements and principles. You're trying to achieve visual unity through like organizing the thing just right, by kind of guiding your viewer through this composition. Again, elements and principles working together to create an experience for your viewer. All right, so the elements of art, again, these are the building blocks of art and design. All right, so line. It's such a simple thing, but oftentimes overlooked. And one definition of line is the path that a point takes as it moves through space, right? And the key ingredient there is movement. Line is a key way to create eye movement. And if your viewer's eye is not moving, they're bored and they're going to leave. So use line effectively. All right. Shape. A visually perceived area of value or texture or color, right? And you can have organic shapes. Like if we look at Magnum Opus here by Hans Hofmann, look at that red splotch, right? That's not a clearly definable shape. It's organic. It is biomorphic. It is kind of derived more from nature. But then if we look at that yellow rectangle, it's clearly a geometric shape, contrasting highly with that red, more amorphous shape behind it, right? So contrast in shapes, very important. Now, shapes can suggest volume, right? Like they contain space if you arrange them just right. And certain shapes can suggest weight, the mass of the shape making up that basket of flowers on that poor guy's back. We feel that weight derived from that shape and its size and its placement. Okay. Now, value is the granddaddy of them all. It is the most important element. Without value, you've got nothing. You can't even make a line without differentiating this value from that. That use of darks and lights is so critical to your work. The beauty of the work, the atmosphere of the work, the mood, the contrast. If you want to wake somebody up, there is no greater contrast than black next to white, right? Those two aspects of value joined together to really write like 90% or more of the story of art. It's all in value. It is the most important element. And don't forget it. When you're designing, think value first. If you put value first, everything else is going to fall into place. Okay. Color. This is the darling of the elements, right? Everybody loves good color. And like color is, essentially derived from light, right? It is derived from light. It's got three properties. It's got hue, saturation, and value, right? Remember, you can't have anything without value. Value is always an aspect of all the other elements. So we've got light emitting various wavelengths that give us our different colors. So important, right? The most emotional element, the most, symbolic element, right? And it gives us the spice, right? It's the thing that makes things really sing and makes them beautiful. All right, now texture. This is actual or simulated surface quality, right? It's like if you could see with your fingertips, right? That's texture, right? That surface quality. Whether it's real or implied, we almost feel it when we see it. Okay. And then there's space, right? the way that you use space, the way that you divide space, the way that you suggest depth. Very critical aspect of what you do as a designer. In this piece, you can clearly see the subject and the background, right? The figure-ground relationship. And in so doing, we also discover that idea of positive and negative space, right? And make no mistake about it, that negative space is just as important as the positive space. Without negative space, you have no positive space, and vice versa. It's the way that you deal with that relationship that makes a big difference in your work. And young designers typically are afraid of negative space. I'm here to tell you that it's so critical. It's so important that you embrace it. Especially you graphic designers, so critical. All right, and so space, we can use perspective to suggest deeper space, right? We see those converging lines in this painting. It's a great way to create that deeper space. Even on a two-dimensional surface, we can suggest that depth, right? Very critical. Okay, so let's take a look at the principles now. These are basically the organizing structure for the elements, right? The way that we arrange things, the way that we manipulate them, these are those ideas of organization that help us kind of make sense of all those elements and put them where we need to, in the right order, in the right combination. Okay, so let's start with variety. And contrast is the big byproduct of variety. You know what variety is. It's like, there's a range of things. There are differences, okay? And it is so important that you focus on, combining the elements to achieve that kind of diversity, to create contrast, which increases visual interest in your work. When you use variety well and create contrast, you're going to enliven those things that are harmonious in the work, right? It's kind of critical that first of all, the way that you establish dominance, a focal point in the design is to create contrast, right? Like black next to white, or in this case, yellow next to purple, opposites on the color wheel that really wake the eye up, right? High contrast is what you need to really wake your viewer's eye up. So it's very critical. Now, we have to see that also through the lens of harmony. Now, harmony is where you combine elements to accent their similarities. You're trying to create relationships that bind the different parts of the piece together to create an overall whole, right? As opposed to just a collection of parts. Now, oftentimes harmony is achieved through repetition, rhythm, pattern, and so when you repeat things, you create a sense of harmony, right? Like the entire thing has a certain language that is understood throughout. So if we look at these elephant masks by the Bamileke people, we see that repetition that creates a sense of harmony throughout the entire design, right? Yes, it may be rather dense and busy, but it has this harmonious structure that runs throughout. It has that underlying kind of framework that unifies everything. Okay, and so if you think about repetition like this. Oftentimes the danger is if you repeat something too much, what happens? It gets boring, right? Too much of a good thing, not enough spice. Everything is too similar. That's not the case here. There's enough, variety within this harmony that it looks great. Well, if we go back to variety, if there's too much of that, things are too chaotic, right? Too much contrast leaves us overwhelmed, right? Too much harmony leaves us underwhelmed. So what you're trying to achieve is a balance of variety and harmony. A great thinker once said, great art, it has variety within harmony and harmony within variety. I think it's very true. You're trying to seek a balance between these two and form a relationship that really works. Okay? So, variety and harmony. Okay. Balance. This refers to the way that the elements of art are arranged to create a feeling of stability in the work. We can see symmetrical balance, asymmetrical, radial balance. Symmetry, it's the same on both sides of that center point. Asymmetrical, it's not the same on either side of that center point. And then radial kind of radiates out. And like here are two examples of radial balance where we've got these elements that do come out from a central point. So we can create balance by positioning, placement of objects, the size of objects, their proportion, right? There's something to be said for the way that you arrange things. Like symmetrical compositions tend to be more formal, like suit and tie kind of formality. Asymmetrical is more relaxed. Radial has a certain dynamic quality about it. So your choice in the way that you go about achieving balance is very important. Dominance, right? The establishment of an area of the design that's emphasized or has the greatest visual weight, a focal point, right? And the way that you create dominance and the way that you create focus is contrast. If we go back to variety, if we put white next to black, we're going to pay attention. Now, there are other ways to achieve dominance, right? You can isolate something and set it off on its own, and it gets more attention that way, believe it or not. The placement of objects, like if we look at the dominant element here in this piece by Goya, that focal point is the martyr, right? X marks the spot. He's got his arms up. It's that white shirt against that. The rest of the design is so dark. All of the lines are pointing to him, right? There's scale, there's different character, use of direction, these moments of force, right, that lead your eye to that point of focus. And this is a good example of the real world, what dominates? The guys with the guns. But in Goya's world, in his world of art, it's the martyr who has the power, right? The most dominant force in this composition is the victim, right? Interesting. Okay. Remember, artists, have more power than we think we do. All right. So, moving on. And remember, about dominance, have a focal point, please. Have a focal point. Have one clear focal point and let everything else support it. It's so critical. Create that point of dominance in your design and let everything else support that point. Okay. Proportion. Size of parts in relationship to the whole. or to each other, right? If we look at Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, we see those proportions of the human body, right? Hand to arm, to torso, to head, to like overall height. There's a certain proportion that could be understood as, like human form. But, so the parts in relationship to each other and in relationship to the whole, there are certain proportional norms, although we could argue about what's normal and what's not. But if you look next door at that René Magritte painting, what's he doing with proportion? He's exaggerating the scale of that apple to really get you to sit up and pay attention, right? So the relationship of the apple to the room is not what we expect. So you're not just using proportion to make things seem accurate. You're using proportion to get your viewer's attention, right? The size of objects, whether it's smaller or larger, makes a difference, right? Okay. Economy. The paring down of a design to its most essential elements for the sake of clarity. We're trying always to seek the right balance in everything that we're doing, and sometimes using an economical approach where you keep things simple and you take out everything that seems superfluous and you just focus on the essentials. Using an economical approach is a really good idea. Less is more. You've heard that. But there are times when you want the flip side of economy. You want density, right? Again, there's a spectrum. Sometimes you need a really densely packed canvas to tell the story the way that you need to. So it's not always going to be simplify, simplify, simplify. Sometimes it is going to need to be, more chaotic and more densely packed. It's just up to you and your subject matter and your content and what you need to effectively say what you need to say visually. So another way to exercise economy is through abstraction, right? If we simplify something, which is essentially what abstraction is, we take something and we simplify it, we can create a more direct, in some ways, a more direct way of speaking to our viewer. So if we take a look at, a simple sketch by Degas, like this is just using only what's necessary, nothing more, nothing less. It's just the essential information, right? Pared down. But if we look at this piece, right, this is another way of achieving economy, and that's by abstracting. If we look at this pixelated version of the Mona Lisa, we've removed a lot of the details and we're just left with the essential form. And then if we look at the original with all the detail, it's not abstract anymore. It's more illusionistic, more realistic. All right? And again, so there's a spectrum. If we look at this range of abstraction in Scott McCloud's excellent book, Understanding Comics, if you look at the progression of that face from more detailed to more simplified, more abstract, essentially what's happening is you're emphasizing what's most important, right? When you see all the details, you can get lost in those details, and we're not focused so much on the eyes and the mouth, right? But as you progress along that line of abstraction and simplification, at the end there, we just see eyes and mouth, right? It is a way of amplifying what's most important when we abstract things, when we use economy. Make sense? Okay, so finally, movement. Such a critical principle of design. This is a way of combining elements of art to produce the look of action, right? as an artist, you can guide your viewer's eye through a piece. You can use line, shape, the arrangement of those things to create a sense of motion. If we look at this Caravaggio piece, like look at the way that the hands lead your eye through the composition, the sweep of the figure through it, the way that they're arranged and shaped, real lines and implied lines, all of it works together to keep our eye moving and happy and excited. That's what movement does for your work, is to get your viewers excited and hold their attention. If their eye is moving, they're happy, and they're going to stick around. They're going to want to see more. So a lot of your job is just like learning to be traffic cop, moving your viewer's eye through the picture plane from one element to the next. You get the idea? Okay, so there you have it. It's essentially the components, the elements, and principles of design, the essential language of art that you need to succeed as a visual thinker. All right, so I want you all to study these things and consider them as you're making the work. Don't leave any stone unturned. All these elements, principles, components deserve your attention. And if you're worried that, man, this piece just isn't working right, go back through these ideas that I've just thrown at you. Go one by one through the elements and the principles and the components and ask yourself, have I really considered this? Because your salvation is usually found within this list, right? You can find something here that'll make a mediocre piece much better and a good piece great, right? All right, so there you have it, the secret knowledge of art and design. Now that you have this knowledge, it's up to you to use it for good and not evil. All right? All right, go out there and make some great art. I'll talk to you soon.